Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio. I'm James Spencer.
And this is Andy Sparks.
We're sitting out on Andy's, deck. I was going to say balcony, but it's a deck.
Oh, it's a big deck.
Andy's got a big deck. And we're sitting on it. Hey
now.
It's not every man who can sit on his own deck. You've got a hot tub on your deck.
Yes, I do have a hot tub on the deck.
Your deck goes around your house.
It does. It goes all the way around the house.
Okay. And we've already been drinking beers. As you can tell. We are discussing, we're gonna go to the GABF. By the time you hear this, we may be on a plane flying out to Denver. So I thought, this would be an excellent opportunity to get together and talk about our plans and also answer some email, because I'm way behind on the email. Life has been pretty busy lately, and so, I've got a backlog of the emails. So I've enlisted Andy's help in that. So before we go on, I have to give the little plug that if you are new to home brewing or you want to learn about home brewing for the first time, you can check out basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of these podcasts as well as our video podcasts and the DVDs to let you learn more. And you can follow me on Twitter. I'm Basic Brewing, and you on Twitter are?
Well, I'm Brew Lager Beard. We'll talk more about that later. But
okay. Brew Lager Beard.
It's my pirate persona on the internet. Everybody comes up with an internet handle, and I had to think of one, and it sounded cool, so I picked it, and I've been carrying it around for years, so that's the one I use.
So maybe there's a further story in the background on that one. Another reason why we're here is I wanted to look at your hops, because we did the video podcast on, you're getting your trellises ready for the beginning of the hop season, and now that it's the end of the hop season, the hops are looking kind of ragged.
Yeah, unfortunately, hops don't look that great near the end of their season. Lots of the leaves die over the year, and they start to look pretty withered and haggard at the end of a year full of storms and stuff like that. So, yeah, they're a little rough at the end of the year.
And you had a kind of a brush with Ike when, what was it, tropical depression by the time it got up here? Ike came through. Did you a little number?
That's right. Yeah, Ike rolled through here. It was right around midnight, I think, when Ike finally got to Fayetteville. And it was, by then, downgraded to tropical depression. But I'll be honest, I don't know. Do you ever remember one of these hurricanes swinging through our neck of the woods on its way? So it was interesting. It was like a really, really bad thunderstorm, but it just lasted a long time. And lots of blowing and stuff. But I was, we had a party here that night, so I was just lying in bed, getting ready to fall asleep about midnight. I'm glad I slept through most of it. So, but yeah, the next day I came out, and one of the arms on the hop trellises had broken, actually snapped during the storm. It was actually one of my Cascades. It's one of the ones that's now 2 years old, and it was one of the biggest plants I have. And so it was as heavy as it could be, and it was blowing really hard that night, and it was at full production. It was kind of at the end of the season. So there you go. If you have a hurricane run through your tin, you may bring down some of your hops if they're not really sturdy, don't have a really sturdy setup. So I'm not sure if I might upgrade the setup next year. Thought a little bit about how I might make it a little stronger, but then again, we probably won't get Ike, another storm like Ike come through here for a long time. So,
well, knock wood.
Yeah, there you
go. But you did get to harvest. It was at the time where it was probably time to harvest, so it just kind of hurried you up maybe a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. We had to pretty much harvest immediately because it was all laying on the ground. There was no really putting it back together. So I basically cut it off at about 1 foot, carried the whole pile up onto the driveway, and then went through and picked off all the hops and collected them all up in a bucket, and then took them in and dried those out. I ended up with about 2.2 pounds of hops from this one plant. There was a lot of hops all in the grass and on the ground that had come down in the storm too, and I didn't go out and collect up those. So I probably would have had closer to 3 pounds, but it's the breaks. But we were able to pick a lot of hops off of this thing. It was nice. It smelled great when you're doing it. You get it all the little stuff on your fingers, the sticky lupulin glands on your fingers. And what we did is I have like a sliding glass door, a screen from a sliding glass door that I don't have up because we don't put the screens up on our house. We like to have everything, open. But so I set those up on a couple of trash cans in the garage, and I laid it out, the 2.5 pounds, 2.2 pounds of hops, easily laid out on that thing, and then I put a fan blowing across just to stir the air in the garage, not to blow at it, but just to keep the air moving. And it took 2-3 days, and then they were dry. So that when you kind of gave them a pinch, they didn't spring back any. They stayed, kind of compact. And then I vacuum packed them into a bag. I just stuffed them all in one big bag. And it ended up being a pitiful a little over 8 ounces. So...
Yeah, that sounds familiar. I did the math on my first harvest of how much shrinkage I actually got between wet and dry, and I think it was like 25% of the original harvest.
Right. I think that's standard. Is 75 to 80% of the moisture is removed, or the weight, which is all water. So.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what time of the year you harvest them, as far as how dry they are actually on the vine and all. But
right. Well, I don't know about you, but I noticed that, and it may be because we're so far south that they have a little different growing pattern than they do in the Pacific Northwest and up in the cooler regions. But I easily could harvest hops in the middle of the summer. Actually, early summer, I was having cones that were starting to feel kind of papery and stuff. So. And I actually harvested hops once early in the spring. Although it seems the vine didn't seem to really like it. It seemed like the vine that I picked all the hops off didn't really do very well after that. And then the new vines, it produced lots of new vines. So I'm not really sure. I'm going to have to kind of play with that a little bit about, how do you do these kind of early harvests and stuff like that.
Yeah, I got 2 harvests as well, and I think thing is, if I didn't harvest those off, they would have turned brown, and I would have lost them.
Right.
So
I agree. So what do you do? I would say go ahead and pick them when they look like they're ready. Go ahead and pick them off. And I have 2 or 3 other ones that I'm going to go get. A lot of the ones that I'm growing now, I had 4 plants from last year. I planted 4 new varieties. So most of my, half my plants plus the EFG are kind of mild producers anyway. So I'm looking for them to come on next year. They just have enough for me to go out there and have fun. And I pull a few cones, and so that's usually first year kind of thing. Is you just grow them, smell them, get used to learning how they work, and do that comparing this hop to that and stuff.
When you say EFG, you mean East Fayetteville Goldings.
That's right. Yeah, we got a letter about that one time, an email, and it was nice. It was a friendly email, but it pointed out that that my hops are really not East Kent Golding because I'm not in East Kent, and he's right. But I noticed that I live in East Fayetteville, so it certainly works. EFGs.
So we got an email from Phil in Reno, Nevada, saying, "Can you guys do a segment on post-harvest hop care? How much to trim back, how to propagate, etc. The basic protect for the winter stuff." I don't know how much they have to protect. Is Reno? Do they get a winter in Reno? They may get snow for all I know. But so what's your? We talked a little bit about strategy before we started recording. I think we're on the same page. What do you do at the end of growing season?
Well, basically, what I do is I trim them back, within about a foot of the ground. With near the end of the season after I harvest, I don't need to have the vines hanging on the thing, and for me, I have to pretty much bring them down to harvest them. So, but then after they die back, they'll turn brown and kind of wither back a little bit, And so in the late fall, start of the winter, I basically cut them back to the ground, and then I cover the crowns with a good 2-3 inches of a good compost. Whether you make it yourself or you go out and get it. But yeah, give them a good layer of compost that protects them from the winter cold. Of course, he's not going to have to worry about that. But yeah, you want to protect them from a freeze. You don't want them to have to have the crowns freeze solid. And they are right at the surface. But yeah, give them a good 2-3 inches of compost, and then kind of keep them weed free. Dress it up, and then you'll be ready for spring. All you'll need to do is run your strings, and then it's like one of the first things that happens. I mean, it happens early in the spring, about the time you start to see asparagus popping up. You'll see these little nibs coming out of the ground, and it's amazing. Within 2 or 3 weeks, they're racing up the strings, and it's about the same time that the daffodils are coming up, and yeah, it's they're really cool plants.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about. He says how much to trim back. I mean, they just die back to the ground, and you just get rid of everything that's above the ground and start fresh the next year. So, and you've actually haven't you kind of prepared the young sprouts, the hop sprouts?
Right. I've actually have a few friends that have come by and got some of the little the runners. That's what we're talking about. What'll happen is as they grow, they'll send off these runners or suckers, as I guess people call them, and they shoot off 6 or 7 inches from the plant and take off and try to grow another plant. Basically, well, you can actually go back 2 or 3 inches back down that little guy under the ground and clip it off, and he's got little rootlets there, and you just put it in a pot with some potting soil, let it go, and within weeks he'll be ready to be put in the ground and take off. So you can actually, since first year hops are really not going to be harvested anyway, if your friend is growing hops and it's halfway through the summer, there's no reason not to go ahead and get yourself a plant started. Your buddy is killing these suckers every week just about. So, if you have a friend with hops, you probably can get some hops of your own and do it that way. Just propagate them off the little suckers.
And you can actually, they say that you can eat the little shoots.
Yep.
Just like fresh young asparagus.
Yep. I've done that once. The guy that works with me, David, he's done it a little bit, and I just did, like a little handful of them and put them in a little butter. The thing is, they're very tender and green, and you saute them in butter. Well, yeah, they're tasty. They don't taste like much, really, It's going
to taste like butter.
Yeah, right. So, but they weren't bad.
Yeah, not necessarily a bad thing.
And the truth is, you get a lot of them, and you get them all year long if you keep them trimmed back to the ground, which I need to do a better job of. It was actually difficult to keep them pruned back enough so that it didn't feel like they were always looking like they were just getting wild. So
yeah, my third year Cascades, it was like, holy smokes, it was a job keeping those things down, and eventually after my first harvest, I just let them all go.
Right. And
they all grew up, and it's kind of a monster looking thing out there. But you get more hop vines, and on my second harvest, I got a bunch of hops.
Yeah, I wish I could actually have more strings running up there, because I could send a lot more up there. I just can't really. One string can only support 2 or 3 plants. 2 or 3 vines before the outside vine starts to choke the inside vine. They start to wrap around each other and cut into them. And actually, I've had a couple where it looks like the earliest vine got completely killed and is dead in the middle of the plant, where the younger plants have crawled up and choked it off, which doesn't make it look very good. There's this kind of dead spots in it and stuff, but you can't really take it out because it's at the middle of the string. So.
And I also found that at the base of the trellis, some of the wild kind of suckers came off there and wrapped themselves around the wood support, and inside that wrapping of hop vines was hops. There were hop cones inside that bundle of vines, but the thing was that those cones never saw the sun. So they were kind of pale, and I picked them anyway, and I looked in and they had lupulin, but really to get optimum hop production, you really need to string them out so that they get,
right.
They're not kept moist, and they get the breeze and they get the sun. So
it's like that white asparagus where they put it, bury it and keep it white. So these hops were actually, had albinoism or whatever.
Yeah, maybe there's a specialty beer that we haven't brewed yet.
White hop beer.
Who knows? So anyway, the hops, they're pretty hardy, and they're hard to kill. And I've told the story many times of the hops that are in my compost heap, that I dug out of the garden, and I didn't care if I killed them or not, and they wound up taking root in the compost heap. So as long as you've got a variety of hop that's right for your area of the country or the world, wherever you are, once you get them established, they're going to be happy, pretty much. Keep them fed, keep them watered.
Yep. Pick the bugs off of them. I don't do a lot of pesticides and stuff. So I just go out there and check them daily, and look around. If there's a bunch of grasshoppers, I just flick them off, and but they grow so aggressively that even if the grasshoppers eat some of the leaves, it seems to be okay. Unless you have a really bad year, a bad infestation or something, they can take a little hit, from some bugs and stuff. So.
Yeah, luckily the Japanese beetles.
They weren't bad this year, were they?
No, they weren't as bad as previous years, and they don't seem to like, especially the cascades, which are a little more. Are we going to get hit by a walnut?
We can. Yeah. We should be wearing some hard hats out here probably, because the trees are full of big fat walnuts, and it is time.
Get hit by a big nut here on your deck. There's another. Have we covered late season hops pretty good?
Late season, I think so.
You ready to move on to the next letter?
Did we talk about you can cut rhizomes, and you should probably do that in the latest part of the winter after the plant is completely dormant, but before it starts to sprout. So kind of after the snow, but it's heading for spring, but it hasn't warmed up yet. That would be the time to dig up. If you have to, if it's been several years, I'd say 8 or 10 years, you may want to actually dig your plant up, trim off around the crown, and then replant the crown. But you can always dig up around it and then cut off. They send out these runners, rhizomes, and you can cut off 2-3 inches sticks of it. That's what you get if you order it. And you can move that over and plant it somewhere else and start another plant that way. So that's how you would propagate, by digging up rhizomes.
Yeah, this next year I'm probably going to split my cascade. It's been in the ground. This was the third year, so I'm kind of dreading it, because I know it's kind of like the iceberg. What you see above ground is just a fraction of what's going on underground. And I know from transplanting that generic hop that we didn't know what it was, that my wife got from the flower catalog, from the garden to the compost heap eventually, that was a monster. Below ground, it was a monster. There are lots of roots, lots of, rhizomes going this way and that way. And so I'm not looking forward to splitting that up. So there's lots of material underground that you can use to start new productive plants elsewhere.
Give to your friends and stuff like that.
Good Christmas presents. Late Christmas presents.
A little late, yeah.
Jeff from Granville, Ohio. We were talking about Ike earlier. Yeah. He says, thanks for your podcast comments regarding those folks in the Midwest affected by Hurricane Ike. We're in central Ohio, and we were without power for 8 days.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Isn't that incredible?
Wow.
Can you imagine? Lots of wind damage, but nothing that a weak mind, strong back, and a chainsaw can't fix. You might be able to hear a chainsaw off in the distance here. Jeff says, ironically, Hurricane Ike helped me solve a brewing problem. I've recently begun brewing with party pigs. Those are those little little things, those little bottles, serving bottles that you can put in the fridge. I would prime the party pig with corn sugar as directed for carbonation, but was having a problem with the final finish of the beer. I wasn't getting a carbonated brew. Then came Ike. The fridge shut down for a week, and there sat my party pigs at room temperature. And interestingly, at the end of the week, I had carbonation. The cause of my lack of carbonation was simply that I've been priming the party pig and putting it directly in the fridge to finish. The lower temperature in the fridge inhibited the yeast, which was unable to initiate the Krebs cycle. Fancy.
Yeah, there you done a little research, it sounds like.
To carbonate the brew. Jeff says, thanks, Ike. Time to put down the chainsaw and enjoy a cold and carbonated homebrew. So there you go.
Awesome.
So there's always a little silver lining to that.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's part of the fun is that you play around and then you solve some of your own problems. You learn a little bit every batch you make.
Yeah, we always get some questions on carbonation, and temperature is critical. I mean, when you think about it, when you are priming your beer, either to go in the bottle or go into something like a party pig, you are putting extra sugar into the beer for the yeast to eat, and the yeast have to be at fermentation temperature because you're doing another fermentation, and if you stick them in the fridge, they're going to go to sleep. They're not going to do the work. That's
exactly right. I mean, professional brewers, the way they get the yeast out of the beer is to put them in the fridge, turn the temperature down, crash the yeast out. So yeah, I mean that's not going to help you get your beer carbonated quickly. Now that's not to say that it won't eventually probably carbonate, because it won't stop fermentation completely. Even ale yeast can continue to work a little bit when they're cold, but you want to get it carbonated quickly. Leave it out at room temperature until it's carbonated, a couple weeks, and then move it to the fridge and let it start to age and condition in the fridge.
So we go from not enough carbonation to too much. Jeremy from Adelaide, down south, down under, says, I have my first batch of beer aging nicely, but came into my study yesterday to find the smell of beer and on its inspection an exploded bottle. Oops. The bottles are all in boxes surrounded by heavy objects, including a metal screen, so no immediate danger, but I was wondering about the likelihood of other bottles exploding. He said, and you're nodding your head furiously, and I answered this email urgently. Yeah. He gave me actual pictures of the hydrometer, saying that that he was pretty sure he reached final gravity. He said, I know the final gravity for most beer. His final gravity was between 1012 to 1010. I know the final gravity for most beer is 1005 to 1008, so this might be a little high. Well, it depends on the beer. Right. However, I'm brewing a Leffe, and the reading was stable for 3 days. They use carbonation drops for priming the bottle, so I figure the issues are, 1, overcarbonation through double priming, a possibility, he says, which means only one bottle would be affected. Number 2, a faulty bottle, could be, but all the bottles were thoroughly inspected for obvious defects. Number 3, the fermentation not being complete, I guess most likely, but does this mean I should watch out for other bottles exploding? So, and he went through a couple of options of, what should he do? So, what I told him was ice down all those bottles immediately, and then once they're iced down, start opening them to see if it is an isolated problem, right, or if all these are overcarbonated. What do you tell people when they say, "Oh, I got a burst bottle, I got a bottle bomb"? What happens?
Well, my first assumption is that they're overcarbonated or they bottled too early. And that they're all on the verge of exploding at that point. Now, if it's possible that he double carbonated this one bottle and he happened to pull this one bottle first, yeah, maybe. I probably would have pulled a second bottle and opened it real quick and just see, is the second bottle the same as the first bottle? If it is, then you pretty much can eliminate the double carbonating thing. If it is, when you open a bottle, it's really fizzy and comes gushing out, then I would do what James says, which is just get them cold fast, because that will help them not be as fizzy. Basically CO2 is absorbed into liquid at lower temperatures. So by doing that, they'll be less fizzy, and the ability to maybe even salvage them if they are overcarbonated. When you refrigerate them, they might just be a little overcarbonated. But yeah, if they are potentially like that, they're potentially all on the verge of blowing up, and you're going to need to open them all and get them open and relieve that pressure, because you don't want a bunch of bottle bombs. They're dangerous, and it's just going to break and make a mess and stuff.
or hurt you. I mean, you could wind up in the hospital with stitches and all that. I mean, these you're talking about shattered glass exploding in your hand potentially.
So, yeah, be careful. Like I said, do a little investigation. Open one, see if it's just as fizzy, or if it's really overcarbonated. Obviously, the first one broke. It could be a flawed bottle, like you said. That would eliminate a couple of your guesses there. And then we could figure out whether you need to drink it real fast or it's going to just need to be all unopened. And then the truth is it's salvageable. You could open it all, pour it into a bottling bucket. That will degas it for the most part. And then, reprime and go back into your bottles, Not an optimum solution. Nobody wants to do that. But, it's not like it's the end of the world. The other thing is if it's just a little fizzy, you can probably pour them into a pitcher and then pour them into a glass and drink them up and just get rid of them fast. That's probably the best option.
Yeah, the only time that I've ever had bottle bombs was when I was living in a previous house that had a small laundry room, and this was in the summer, and the dryer would run and get it really, really hot. Mm-hmm. And the beers were in a little closet in this little laundry room, and I had a couple of bottles break.
Yeah.
So storing your beer at the proper temperature, a safe temperature, is also a factor.
True. I actually have done the bottle bomb thing once too. It's almost like it's a rite of passage for homebrewers or something. Actually, it was a root beer that I made, so it was full of sugar. And it was the classic old-style root beer with champagne yeast and stuff and sugar. I put them into 2-liter bottles, though. And they only burst because I made them burst. It turned out it didn't taste that great, and these 2-liter bottles became really, really, really hard and tight because they were building up all this pressure in them. So I knew I didn't really dig it, and so I took them outside and threw them up in the air. And when they came down on the street, one exploded and ripped the whole 2-liter bottle inside out. The other one just popped the cap off, and since the neck of it's like a little rocket engine, the thing took off and flew over the apartment building and into the neighborhood next door.
I think I've seen that on YouTube.
I think so. So fun with yeast.
Well, here's another. We're going from one end of the scale to the other. Jamie in Alton, New Hampshire, says that he essentially bottled a batch of beer, and long story short, it came out flat with no carbonation, and he has a short time period that he wants to serve this beer. So it's like, what do I do? He essentially primed it and then left the primed beer overnight. So he was thinking that the yeast had time to eat that sugar before he bottled. So yeah, like I say, long story short. So if you do have a flat batch of beer that for one reason or another you have a safe assumption that it's not going to carbonate, even if you give it time, what's the best? Do you do what you just suggested for the overprime beer, and that carefully, because you don't want to oxygenate it.
Right. Yeah,
you don't want to oxidize it.
There's several tricks for this. If you want, you can open each bottle, put a couple carb tabs in there. You could even take a thing of dry brewer's yeast and put a couple grains of brewer's yeast into each bottle. So now you have the two things it needs, unless it was a contamination problem with sanitation solution or something that kills the yeast, which we're assuming isn't the situation. You could put all the pieces back together to get a carbonation started or a fermentation started again in the bottle, and that would be a way to be able to do it and not pour the beer out and back and all that stuff. Fairly, quiet, uninvasive process to try to fix that. And if they don't after that, I'm not sure why your beer's not carbonating. There's something else going on. Like I said, maybe there's something in the beer that's killing the yeast. I don't know. Probably not. This would probably fix it.
So that's a good idea. If you're not trying to release the carbonation and they are actually flat, just open them up. If you think the yeast is dead for some reason, put a little bit more yeast and a couple of, maybe a carbonation drop or carb tab, I think, is what the
right.
the other.
A couple different ideas. I mean, you could do it the old-fashioned way and use the little spoonful of sugar. I don't remember the measurement because I've never done it that way. But the old school method was you would get a funnel and you'd put a little spoonful of sugar into each bottle. So technically, you could even go that route if you just couldn't find carb tabs or those carb drops.
Brian from Tell City, Indiana. We've been emailing back and forth on this problem, and he's still having problems, and he wanted to kind of open it up for everybody. So you can help too, Andy. He says he has a 6.5 gallon carboy that seems to have an imperfection on the inside. Basically, it's indented on the inside, which at first doesn't seem like a big deal, but some sort of mold-looking substance has decided to call it home. I've run my carboy brush across it 3 billion times to no avail. It's almost like an air bubble formed in the middle of the glass with a small opening to the interior, and his brush can't get in there to knock it loose. This theory is only a guess. So he's just, and the last time he wrote in, he said he got around to trying a 1 ounce bleach, 1 ounce white vinegar, which you don't mix together before you put it in the water, in 5 gallons of water, to see if it would rid my carboy of the mold spot. It hasn't touched the mold after 24 hours. So he's got this little imperfection in the carboy that is a little pocket that is apparently big enough that there's mold growing in there now, but he can't get to it. But now, since we're coming into the carboy crisis, those are expensive, and is aside from radiation, what? Maybe listeners, please email suggestions for what Brian is to do. But what would you suggest, Andy?
Well, the problem is that even if he can kill the mold in the hole, he can't stop the next batch of beer from putting the ingredients back in the hole to form another mold. So I think he could probably go to some place where they make lots of bread and they have those big ovens and put the thing in the oven for an hour and, let it get hot. That would kill the thing inside it. So you could feel fairly safe brewing in it again once more, but the problem is it would happen again. So...
And you got to be careful with the glass. As you're heating it, as you're cooling it down, it may break. It's kind of dangerous in itself. You have to do that
slowly. You'd have to put it in there in a cold oven, bring it up, and then turn it off and let it completely cool down. And the guy that has an oven big enough to do that in may want to use it to make money with during that time. So, yeah, it's a pretty tough situation. I would say, unfortunately, he needs to get a different carboy and maybe find another home for that one.
Yeah, it's a sad.
It's a bad thing.
If you can't get that stuff out, you can't be guaranteed that you're going to have a continued good beer. I mean, if you've got an imperfection in the carboy that is going to be a pocket for potentially bad stuff, you're always, at least, even if it doesn't make bad beer, you're always going to at least be worried about it making bad beer.
And if you ever made bad beer, you'd blame it on that pocket.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just, man, I feel bad.
Yeah, because those are good. Those are going to be expensive now.
They are expensive now. And, we can't even get them yet from Italy, but the ones that are the last of the ones from Mexico that they're wholesalers, they've raised the price to the new price, and they're insane. 5-gallon carboys are in the $40 range. It's just crazy. Those things used to be $12, $13. You get them for a deposit of $7, and now they want $45 for one. It's crazy.
Now, is that wholesale or retail?
That's retail.
So, yeah.
Unfortunately, it's all rolls downhill.
So, unless, like I say, we'll throw it out there to the listeners. Email me, james@basicbrewing.com, or use the contact form on basicbrewing.com. I'll forward your suggestions to Brian to see if he can get that stuff out of the wall of his carboy. But it's a tough situation.
Yeah, if you could get that hole plugged somehow, maybe a glass blower could plug it somehow, but you'd still have to get inside there. It's such a small space, so it doesn't look good.
Just use it to make ships inside a bottle. You can make a big ship inside the... Nick from Pawtucket, Rhode Island, says he has a question about kegging and conditioning. And I think this is an easy one for you, Andy. After 10 to 14 days, I plan on kegging a golden ale I currently have in my primary. Was wondering if immediately refrigerating the beer after racking to my keg will impede or even negate the conditioning process due to the cold temperatures. Would it be better to rack the beer to the keg and keep it at room temperature for another week or two before I refrigerate to ensure the conditioning process isn't hindered?
I would say if that makes you feel better, go for it. I mean,
it's not going to hurt anything.
Yeah, it's not going to hurt a thing. I doubt it's really going to help anything. It depends how fast you want the beer. It might not hurt it to go another week on the yeast. I mean, the truth is, as soon as you start to chill it, you're going to crash the yeast. The yeast is going to get to the bottom. And if you put it in a keg, that first glass of beer is going to have all your yeast in it. So it's not going to have a chance to kind of clean the beer up as yeast. And that's one of the things that yeast does for us. And one of the nice things especially about bottle-conditioned beer, is that it has the chance to kind of do that evolve thing, where the beer evolves. So I would say go ahead and give it another week. It sounds like that's kind of the way you're leaning, and it makes you feel better, and the beer's pretty young. So, yeah.
Yeah, my rule is if it's just a moderate gravity ale, keep it in the primary for a couple weeks and then bottle. And then, of course, I leave it in the bottle for, a couple weeks after that before I start drinking it. But, a couple weeks on the primary yeast. Maybe if you want to go another week, should be okay.
It's actually one of the biggest kind of flaws, or one of the biggest things that new brewers do, is they're trying to rush to the beer. They're trying to rush to the bottle, and they just don't have the patience. And I certainly understand. I was the same way. 2 weeks, and I was ready to put in the bottle. In 2 weeks, I was, a week and a half, I was ready to try the first one. And the truth is, patience is rewarded. Don't be in a rush. Brew another beer. Get it's better if you wait. The truth is, the beer will be better if it's given the time to do its work, and finish it up. Now, we've both, done like really fast beers. How fast can I make a beer? And professional brewers do some of that. How fast can I make a beer? Yeah, it's doable. You can do it, but does that make the best beer? No, probably not.
Yeah, one of the most heartbreaking things for a new brewer is to quickly get the beer into the bottle, and then like a week later try one, say, oh, this is pretty good, and then drink most of them, and then maybe keep a 6-pack back in the back for archiving, and then 2 months later come back and drink that beer, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is, it's almost always the case that the last 6-pack is the best 6-pack in a homebrew batch. So,
Rick from Woodstock, Illinois, made some great brews lately, but I'm ready to rack my next batch into the secondary. My question is, how often do you recommend replacing your racking canes and tubing? I've never convinced that I get them as clean as I could as they get older.
I certainly understand that. Racking canes, I don't replace those as often. Once every couple years maybe. And actually what I did is I upgraded to the auto siphon, I think, from the racking cane that I was using. And it's usually because I do something stupid, is that I'll leave it with the, not rinse it really, really well, and then I'll pick it up later and see some white fuzz growing in a corner of it, and I'll think, well, that's the end of that one, and have to throw it away. But I'm really paranoid about the rubber hoses, or the tubing, the vinyl tubing. I'm notorious for getting brand new tubing almost every time I brew. I'm probably hypersensitive to it. I probably shouldn't do that. The trick is to keep them well rinsed and clean. But if you're nervous, as soon as you start to question it, you should probably get rid of it, because it's a cheap item, and you don't want your beer to go bad and then be looked back and say, I thought I should have replaced that hose. You know?
Yeah,
it's just not.
We're just talking about a couple of bucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, the racking cane or the auto siphon, that's hard plastic. And my ritual is just as soon as I rack my beer, I run to the sink and I rinse it. Mm-hmm. So that and then after I get through brewing that day, I wash it in soapy water and get it all clean. But I think as long as you rinse with hot water just as soon as you can, you're not going to have to worry as much.
Right. And that's the trick, is to get it rinsed out. But rinsing alone isn't enough. You need to rinse and then wash it. The trick is rinsing it right away keeps anything from drying in there and getting set up. You still need to give it a good soap and water wash. You don't necessarily need to put a brush in there, but get it rinsed out with soap and water that gets the stuff off of the surface. And rinse it out good, let it dry, and you'll be good to go. But the vinyl hose, they're just, you can only use them so many times before you just can't trust them anymore.
One handy thing that I do is I get my sink full of soapy water, and then I put my carboy on the floor by the sink, and then I pump, I siphon soapy water through the auto siphon and the tubing, and give it, several good pumps, to scrub it out, kind of on the inside, and just let soapy water run through the racking cane or auto siphon and hose, and that way
it's a great way to do it.
It also transfers soapy water into the carboy or the bottling bag, whatever. It's like a twofer. But also, if your vinyl tubing starts to get hard, probably time to go.
For sure. Or starts to yellow, get rid of it. If it's yellow because you put it in some iodine solution, you can actually set it out in the sun, and that will bleach that color out of it again, and you can reuse it. But when they start to get old and start to yellow from lots of beers in them and stuff, it's just time to change. I use them for other things, but it's hard to put a brand new, fresh, wort or beer through an ugly looking hose. You're just, it just kills me. I can't do it.
Mark from Berkeley, Michigan, says, I've brewed about 5 batches so far, and they've all turned out well. Congratulations. I bottle all of my beer, but I don't own a bottling bucket. Mm-hmm. And Andy says, as the homebrew store owner, yes, buy a bottling bucket. I have to borrow one from my friend every time I bottle. Is there a way to bottle from a carboy without use of a bottling bucket? Cassie. Oh, girl. Says, I do own an auto siphon and also a carboy cap, if that helps. So you don't have to have a bottling bucket, but it sure is handy to have one.
Right. I mean, if you have somebody there to help you, I don't think it's that hard, really, because you can get the siphon started, and one person can stand there and make sure that the racking cane or the auto siphon is pointed into the deepest part and not sucking up yeast, and then the other person can sit there and bottle. I would suggest, if you're going to do this, to use a fairly long length of hose, use a bottling wand, and set the carboy up a good bit higher than where you're going to sit to bottle. So, and that allows you to set the bottle down and then stick the wand into the bottle and press down with the wand instead of having to lift the bottle up to a wand. You can do it. The problem is the other end of it, where somebody's got to keep from having, the breaking the siphon and keeping it right in the right spot, the sweet spot. The bottling bucket's nice because you can just rack into it, move it up to the counter, open the spigot with the bottling wand on it, and just start bottling.
And also, if you don't use a bottling bucket, then you're getting into dosing each bottle with the priming sugar.
This is very true. So,
which you can do with the carbonation drops from Cooper's, or Muntons have their carb tabs.
Sorry.
I thought your neighbor had a bomb. What was
Sorry, I had Mexican food for lunch.
So anyway, yeah, you can bottle without using a bottling bucket, but you have to. Is that a what kind of device is that?
That's a Harley.
Oh, that's a Harley?
Yeah.
It's got adenoid problems or something. That doesn't sound. Can you hear that? Is that a Harley chainsaw, or what is that?
No, it's a big old Harley. They're going to ride out here. It was Blues Bikes and Barbecue last weekend, and they were, both him and his wife have full dress Harleys down there.
Oh, well, okay. Greg from Columbus, Ohio says, I'm hoping you can settle a bet between two home brewers. Our contention is over what kills the active yeast in a high-gravity beer. Is it 1, the presence of alcohol, the high presence of alcohol, or 2, the yeast cell walls are destroyed by high-gravity fluid? I can tell. I answered this, and I'll tell you what I said after you say what you did.
In a high gravity beer, I guess it depends. My question would be: is it high enough that the alcohol can kill it, or is it just not a conducive environment? I would say it's probably the alcohol, because they can go very, very high.
That's what I said. I essentially said that the yeast is in a closed environment, and it's essentially poisoning itself as it goes through fermentation. So it's creating alcohol and CO2. Both are poisonous to the yeast. And then the yeast cell walls are destroyed by a high gravity fluid. I guess that's osmotic pressure or whatever.
Well, what I would say to that is that the fluid is at a very high gravity at the start of fermentation. Near the end of fermentation, a big high gravity beer can still be very thick and very sweet, and still at a higher gravity. But those yeast have been in a much higher gravity up until then. What the problem is at that point is not the high gravity of the wort. But I understand that there are some effects to the cells as they get into that very high alcohol range. And I don't know whether it's the alcohol that's affecting them and how the alcohol poisons the yeast and what it does to the yeast after that happens. Does that help them break down more and cause autolysis and stuff like that? I don't know.
And if you're talking about on a homebrew scale, the the bike is out.
It's a girl.
What?
It's a young lady.
Oh, the bike is just idling.
It's a 2000 edition. It's that 100th anniversary edition Harley. See the silver and black paint? See the young lady about to get on it?
Yeah. Well. Okay. Well, she's got a giant helmet. So.
Good for her.
Yeah. In my book, that's a plus. But I ride a 49cc Yamaha scooter, and I still have a helmet, so that shows my caliber.
Yeah. Gotta make one more cell phone call before she gets on the bike.
But we were distracted. This is the last. Okay, but what I was going to say is, in a homebrew environment, when you're only working like 5 or 10 gallons, the pressure of that, even a high gravity beer on the yeast as it sits in the bottom, is not going to be too much of a factor. When you've got a, however many barrel fermenter in a commercial production environment, then you've got an actual. It's the weight of the fluid on the yeast that's going to do some damage.
A lot more pounds per square inch pressing down on the yeast in a production fermenter as opposed to a carboy.
Right. I hope that helps. One last question. Joe from Skysville, Maryland says, in the past I've used corn sugar to prime my bottled beers. When I used Irish moss in the boil, I produced a nice clear beer. However, my last two batches I've primed with dry malt extract. These beers have been cloudy. When I bottle the beer, it looked very clear, but when I now enjoy it, it's cloudy, and chilling seems to make it more cloudy. My question is, do I need to worry about creating chill haze due to the hot-cold breaks and other proteins introduced when I sterilize my DME priming solution? There she goes. If so, how can I correct this? Add some Irish moss when I prepare my dry malt extract priming solution? Well, I would say that would be a no-no right there. You don't want to put Irish moss in your priming solution.
No, Irish moss is from what I understand, is for a very specific thing. It's used at the end of a boil. Part of the process is that it has to boil and kind of get swollen up, and then that's when it starts to do its clinging thing. Its positive, negative charges attract So I wouldn't put it in there. The other thing about Irish moss is it smells like seaweed. And you wouldn't want to add anything that would give any aromatic characteristics that you don't want in your finished beer in with the priming sugar. So I would say that's a no-no.
But he's talking about he's getting more chill haze, apparently, with dry malt extract than he is with dextrose or corn sugar.
When he primes?
Yeah. So the simple answer is just go back to corn sugar, go back to dextrose.
Right, you could do that. It surprises me. I'm wondering how many times he's done it. Has he done it enough, or was it just this one batch that turned out hazy? I do know several people that prime with DME, and they like to do that. The other thing you can do is you can save back some of the original batch when you boil it up, and save some of the original wort back. There's some calculations you'd have to look it up. I can't do it from off the top of my head, but you can actually prime your beer with itself, with its unfermented self. That's called krausening, as I remember, and that's an option too. And that way, you're not using corn sugar if that's what your thing. You don't want to use that, but you're not necessarily using DME. I would say make sure you've boiled the DME thoroughly. Before using it, let it cool. Make sure you don't dump any of the stuff that's on the bottom of the saucepan, because it'll drop some stuff out too. So, but I don't know. I think he needs to try it again, probably.
Well, there you go. Well, Andy, I appreciate your time. We're going to be spending a lot of time with each other this coming week, and hopefully we'll be seeing other folks out there. Follow us on Twitter, Basic Brewing and
Brew Lagerbeard.
And maybe Andy can explain to you in person what that's all about. But Andy is the owner of thehomebrewery.com in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and I look forward to next week with the Great American Beer Festival, and I appreciate your time, Andy.
No problem, James. This is going to be a blast, and I can't wait.
Woohoo! Well, it's me back again in the studio. Thanks once again to Andy for spending time and sharing beers out on his deck. And I look forward to our time in Denver once again for the Great American Beer Festival, and I hope to see you guys out there too. Be sure to follow our exploits on Twitter once again. Once again, I'm Basic Brewing, and he's Brew Lager Beard. So look forward to seeing you there. It's going to be fun. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com, and please don't forget to tell us where you're from. And I've heard of Harley before, but just not, that one seemed like it was higher pitched than most. I, expect those, kind of deep, Harley sounds. I don't know. Maybe it was just the angle of the where the sound was coming from. You can check out our low-tech lagering and decoction mashing DVD on basicbrewing.com, where you can see Steve Wilkes do a single-step decoction mash, and you can follow me through a lager fermentation in the middle of summer without a dedicated chest freezer. There are also our original DVDs in Basic Brewing Introduction to Extract Home Brewing. We walk you through the extract brewing process step by step from boiling to bottling. And in Basic Brewing Stepping into All Grain, we take you through the all grain process from milling your grain to collecting your wort. We've got combo deals, and you can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order it from us online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Remember our shirts. We got shirts of different colors. And also, thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Grateful Dead gear, the band's instruments, sound systems, and recording sessions from 1965 to 1995. That sounds cool. And the Mixer Bible, over 300 recipes for your stand mixer. Thanks again, everybody. Remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We appreciate your support. We'll get a little chunk of that, and you won't have to pay any extra. So everybody's a winner. That's all until next week. Until Until then, thanks for listening. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson down in Austin. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.